The sky above the battlefield burned in shades of dark red and gold. Broken warships floated in the smoky clouds, while the ground below was covered in the ashes of a once great empire. The screams had faded now, leaving only silence and the distant crackle of flames. Bodies lay scattered, some human, some alien, some unrecognizable. But she was still breathing. Queen Zalara, feared across systems, once undefeated in combat, now sat slumped against a broken pillar. Her right leg was bent at a strange angle. Her armor cracked and the glow in her skin flickered like a dying star. Her blood, deep violet, spilled onto the cracked stone beneath her. She didn't scream. She didn't cry. She only stared ahead, as if refusing to show weakness even in this moment. She was a warrior bred for war, trained to destroy. Her people saw emotions as flaws, and humans were beneath notice. They were weak, slow, soft. Slaves, tools, disposable. She had killed hundreds of them with her bare hands, but one of them had survived. He moved quietly through the rubble, hiding from patrol drones, stepping carefully over debris. His face was marked with dirt and bruises, but his eyes stayed sharp. He wore a metal collar around his neck, the mark of a slave. His name was Kale, and no one noticed him. That was his advantage. Kale didn't understand why he was still alive. The Queen's armies had collapsed. The resistance had turned. Her enemies had closed in fast. She had fought them all back, but in the final blast, she was thrown like a broken doll across the battlefield. And now she was here, alone, wounded, and vulnerable. Kale had served in the palace once. He remembered her voice. Sharp, cold, always full of authority. He remembered her walking past him, not even looking at him, like he didn't exist. But now, for the first time, she looked small, mortal. He found her by accident, tucked between fallen stones and dead soldiers. At first he froze. She didn't see him. Her head was low. Her breathing was uneven. A part of him told him to walk away. Let her die. Let the galaxy lose one more tyrant. But he didn't. Instead, he moved closer. She heard him. Her head turned. Her glowing eyes narrowed. Her hand reached for the blade near her waist, but her fingers slipped. The blade clattered to the ground. Kyle didn't move. "I should kill you," she whispered, her voice dry. "You can't," he replied. There was silence. She hated him. She didn't need to say it. It was in her eyes. But there was something else there too. Pain. Not just in her leg. In her pride. In her defeat. He knelt beside her and looked at her injury. It was bad. The bone was broken, muscle torn. She would bleed out in minutes. He didn't speak. He tore a strip from his own shirt and began wrapping her leg. Her eyes watched every move, like a predator unsure if it should strike or let itself. "Be helped. You are a slave," she hissed. "I was," he said, her face twisted, maybe in anger, maybe in shame. Kale pressed down to stop the bleeding. Her body tensed, but she didn't scream. Her skin was cold. Not like death, but like metal left in winter. He remembered the stories. She could burn planets, rip men apart with her claws. And now he was holding her leg like she was just another injured soldier. The sound of distant footsteps echoed through the ruins. Search drones. Soldiers. If they found her, she'd be taken prisoner or killed. Kyle looked at her face. Even now, she wouldn't ask for help. Her pride wouldn't allow it. So he didn't ask. He simply lifted her. She was heavier than she looked, all muscle and armor and energy. She didn't resist, not yet. She just stared at him in silence as he began moving through the wreckage. Her heart burned with confusion. Why would a human save her? Why didn't he run? He didn't know either. But the war had changed everything, and this was just the beginning. Kyle moved fast through the shattered ruins, each step careful, his arms locked tightly around her. The warrior queen's body was heavy with armor and pride. But she didn't fight him. Not yet. Her breath stayed shallow, and her blood left a trail behind them like violet ink on broken stone. Above them, patrol drones swept the sky. They couldn't stay in the open. Kale ducked into a crumbling structure, the remains of an alien temple, once used for ceremonies of power. Now it was dust and darkness. He laid her down gently near a corner where stone walls still stood. She opened her eyes again. Her voice came out as a low growl. "You should have left me." "I didn't," he said simply. Her gaze stayed hard. "You think saving me will buy your freedom?" Kale didn't answer. He knew better than to argue with a queen, even a dying one. Instead, he tore more cloth from his shirt and poured water from his flask onto the fabric. He cleaned the blood from her leg, careful not to touch her skin more than needed. Her body was warm now, the kind of heat that came from pain and exhaustion. As he worked, she watched him silently. He wasn't what she expected. Humans were soft, cowardly, always afraid. That's what she had been taught. But this one didn't flinch when she bared her teeth. He didn't beg or tremble. He treated her like someone who mattered. Not a ruler, not a killer, just someone hurt. "You served in the palace," she said after a while. "Yes," he answered. "Cleaning floors?" "Sometimes," he said. "Other times I was in the healing wing." She blinked. That surprised her. "You're not a soldier." "No," Kale said, "but I've seen enough broken bones to know how to fix one." She looked down at her leg. The makeshift bandage was tight. Pain throbbed in waves, but the bleeding had slowed. She hated needing him. She hated being helpless. But deep down, part of her hated something more. How calm he was, how steady. The sound of boots echoed in the distance. Not drones this time. Soldiers. They were getting closer. Kale stood and peeked out of the temple. 5, maybe 6 figures moved between the ruins, sweeping the area. He cursed under his breath. They would find them soon. He turned to her. "We need to move again. I can't walk. I'll carry you." Her face twisted in anger. "You forget who I am." "I haven't forgotten anything," Kale said. "But if they find you here, they'll take your head." For a moment, her pride flickered again. But it was no longer stronger than her survival instinct. She gave the smallest nod. He lifted her once more, slower this time. Her arm went around his shoulder, not to hold him, but to balance herself. Her claws brushed against his back. She could kill him in one quick motion. He knew that. She knew that. But she didn't. They moved out the back of the temple, down a slope of rocks toward the shadow of an old bridge. The ground there was darker, covered in ash and metal. It smelled of smoke and blood, but it was the only path not watched. As they passed under the ruined bridge, her head leaned against his shoulder. Just a little. Maybe it was the pain, or the exhaustion, or something else neither of them wanted to name. "You could escape," she murmured. "I could. You're not going to." "No. Why?" He didn't answer right away. Instead, he laid her down under a thick piece of fallen stone and sat beside her. "Because you're not done yet," he finally said. She stared at him. In all her years of war, no one had spoken to her like that. Not even her generals, not even her bloodline. And never a slave. In the silence that followed, something shifted. Not trust. Not yet. But the beginning of something unexpected. And it frightened her more than the pain. Night came fast, covering the ruins in shadows and cold air. The stars above flickered through the holes in the broken ceiling, silent witnesses to a war that had shattered empires. Kyle sat beside the queen, keeping watch. His body ached from carrying her, but he didn't complain. He didn't dare close his eyes. Solara lay still, her breathing slower now. The bleeding had stopped, but her leg was badly swollen. Infection would come if she wasn't treated soon. Her skin, normally glowing with power, had lost some of its shine. Even so, there was strength in her presence. Even in pain, She looked like a ruler. She opened her eyes again and studied the human sitting beside her. His eyes were sharp, like a soldier's, but he didn't wear armor. He had no weapons. Only rough hands, tired eyes, and a strange calm. "Why are you still here?" she asked quietly. Kale didn't look at her. "Because you're still breathing. You owe me nothing." "You're right," he said. "Then why?" Kale thought for a moment. Then he leaned back against the stone. "Maybe I want to know what you'll do when you survive." She didn't answer. No one had ever asked her that. They always expected her to lead, to fight, to win. No one ever cared about what came after. The silence between them wasn't heavy anymore. It felt strange, unfamiliar. She hated it, but at the same time she didn't want it to end. A faint sound snapped their attention to the far side of the ruins. Voices, low and echoing. Soldiers again, not hers. Kale crouched and moved to the edge of the stone. He peeked out. Flashlights swept across the rubble. Their search was getting closer. "They're tracking us," he whispered. She pushed herself up slightly, grimacing. "Then leave me." "No. You'll die. I'll take that risk." Her eyes locked on his. "You're a fool." "Maybe," he said. "But I'm a free one now." She blinked. That answer caught her off guard. He returned to her side and quickly smeared ash over her armor to hide the glow. Then he did the same to himself. The scent was harsh, but it helped mask their trail. She watched him work, fast and focused. There was discipline in him, even if he never trained as a soldier. He moved behind her and braced her shoulders. "I know a path through the canals. It's tight, but they won't follow. You can't carry me forever. I don't need forever, just long enough." Without waiting for her approval, he helped her stand. She gritted her teeth as pain ripped through her leg. She leaned on him heavily, claws digging into his arm. He didn't flinch. Step by step, they moved through, the side path squeezing through fallen arches and shattered stone. Water dripped from above. The smell of rust and rot filled the air. They descended into a collapsed drainage tunnel, dark and narrow. It wasn't the path of a queen, but it was a path to live. As they reached a deeper part of the tunnel, Kale stopped and let her sit against the damp wall. He lit a small glow stick and placed it near her. She looked at him, unsure of what to say. No one had ever followed her into darkness before. No one had ever stayed when it would have been easier to run. "I remember your face now," she said suddenly. He looked up. "You were the one who refused to kneel when I walked through the palace gates." Kyle nodded. "You had just won the war on Zareth. You paraded your enemies through the halls. And you didn't bow." "No," he said. "But I didn't spit either." She gave a faint, bitter smile. "I noticed. That's why you were sent to clean the pits. And that's where I learned to survive." They sat in silence again. This time it wasn't cold, just quiet. Then, softly, she said, "You should have been broken by now." Kyle looked at her and said, "So should you." The tunnels grew tighter as they moved deeper. Pipes dripped, cold water from above, and the air grew thick with old dust and metal rot. Kale guided the queen through the shadows with slow, careful steps. Her weight leaned heavier on him now. Her body was strong, but even warrior queens had limits. She hated the weakness in her limbs, hated needing help, hated feeling like prey instead of predator. But Kale never looked at her like she was broken. That somehow made it worse. They stopped to rest near an old maintenance door, half buried under rubble. Kale shifted stones and forced it open with a grunt. Inside was a small chamber, an old control room long forgotten. There were broken screens, shattered glass, and the smell of burned circuitry. But it was dry and hidden. He lowered her onto a seat near the corner, then sat down across from her. For a long time, neither spoke. Finally, she broke the silence. "My enemies will tear this planet apart looking for me." Kale looked at her. "And if they find you?" "They'll use my body as a symbol," she said, "to prove they broke the strongest of my kind." Then we don't let them find you. Her eyes searched his face. You speak like you have a plan. I do, he said. But first your leg needs real care. That break isn't healing without help. There are no healers left. My med units were destroyed. My people scattered. There's a human outpost, a hidden one, Kale said. I was stationed near it before I was captured. It's underground, past the East Ridge. If we reach it, they'll have supplies, medical kits, shelter. She narrowed her eyes. You want me to trust more humans? I'm not asking you to trust them, Kale replied. Only to survive. She leaned back, her breathing slower now. The pain dulled but never left. Her thoughts ran wild with images of her army, her palace, her empire, all gone in a single brutal strike. And now, a human slave was the only thing keeping her alive. Your people, she said slowly, would shoot me on sight. Kyle nodded. Most likely. Then it's a suicide path. I've walked it before, he said. Alone. Sick. Half dead. They helped me then. She raised a brow. And they let you return to slavery after that? They didn't know. I never told them I escaped the palace. That surprised her. Most men would beg for freedom. He walked away from it. You're strange, she whispered. I hear that a lot. She closed her eyes, resting for the first time in hours. The room hummed with the soft static of a still active wire somewhere in the wall. Cal watched her quietly. Her chest rose and fell with slow, even breaths. He couldn't forget what she was, what she'd done. Her name alone made soldiers tremble. Yet now, she looked peaceful, tired, maybe even human. Suddenly, the faint sound of boots echoed again, this time too close. Kale grabbed a rusted metal rod and crept toward the door. A red laser scanned the hallway outside. A patrol drone hovered silently, searching. He moved fast, disabling the switch just before it reached their door. The laser dimmed. The drone turned and floated away. He returned to find her awake, eyes narrowed. You're not just a slave, she said. No, he replied. You were trained. Kale hesitated, then nodded. I was part of a resistance cell before the fall, captured during a raid, branded, sent to your palace. She stared at him long and hard. And you never tried to kill me? I thought about it, he said. Many times, but killing you wouldn't fix anything. That answer hit her harder than she expected. We leave in the morning, he added. You need to rest. She didn't reply. She just turned her face away and closed her eyes again, but she wasn't asleep. She was thinking. And for the first time she wondered who Kale truly was. Not just a human, not just a slave, but something far more dangerous. The morning came with a red sky and the low hum of search ships flying overhead. The world above them was still hunting for something, or someone. Kyle checked the ruined chamber one last time before helping the queen to her feet. Her leg was worse now. The swelling had spread, and her body trembled slightly with every step. But she didn't complain. She never asked for help. Still, when Kale wrapped his arm around her waist and pulled her close for support, she didn't stop him either. They moved through the lower tunnels in silence. The walls were marked with ancient carvings from a species long gone. Faint light flickered through cracks in the ceiling. The air grew hotter as they descended toward geothermal vents, natural heat sources Kyle knew from his past escape. After nearly an hour, they reached a narrow passage that opened into a larger chamber. Inside stood a collapsed transport shuttle, half buried in ash and debris. Kale had used this place once before, but now it was more dangerous. The old beacon inside still worked, and that made it a signal point for anyone nearby. Kale helped her sit against the side of the shuttle. She gasped slightly, hiding it behind gritted teeth. Her pride still refused to show weakness, but her body was failing her. You need antibiotics, he said, checking the wound again. I don't need anything, she muttered. You're burning up. Good. Let the fire finish what the enemy started. He looked her in the eyes. Stop pretending you want to die. That made her pause. Her glare softened, not with kindness, but with surprise. You think you know me? She asked. I think I've carried you long enough to understand. You don't want to end like this. She turned her face away, but she didn't argue. Cale searched the shuttle wreckage and pulled out a half-broken communication pad. He knelt and tapped in a code, one he hadn't used in years. If the humans still operated their hidden outpost, this signal might reach them. But it was a risk. It could also lead their enemies right to them. He pressed the button. Signal sent, he said. Now we wait. She looked at him from the ground. You'd risk your own people for me? I'm not risking them. I'm risking myself. You were a prisoner, a branded slave. And now you command your own fate. Kyle shrugged. Freedom doesn't always come with a victory. Sometimes it starts with a decision. She studied him for a long time. Her kind never spoke in riddles. They never questioned orders. They crushed weakness. But this man, he carried her, protected her, challenged her, and still didn't ask for anything. Why haven't you killed me? She asked, voice low. He sat beside her. Because I think there's still something left in you worth saving. You saw what I did to your kind. Yes. And I saw what war did to mine. She didn't answer. She couldn't. Her heart thudded with unfamiliar confusion. For the first time in her life, someone didn't fear her, worship her, or want to use her. He just stayed. A sudden beep cut through the silence. Kyle jumped up and checked the pad. A response. Help is coming, he said. How long? 30 minutes, maybe less. They both looked at each other. That meant hope. It also meant exposure. If Cale could reach his people, so could their enemies. She pushed herself up straighter, sweat dripping down her temples. Her claws clenched at the dirt beside her. She hated being dependent, but her instincts told her this man hadn't saved her out of luck. He had saved her because something in him was stronger than chains, something she had never seen before. The kind of strength her empire had never prepared her for, the kind of strength that didn't roar, but refused to break. And for the first time in her life, Queen Zilara felt afraid of what that meant. The whine of engines echoed through the sky above the ruins. Cale looked up, heart pounding. The human outpost had responded faster than expected. That was both good and dangerous. In a broken war zone, movement drew attention. Queen. Zilara sat upright against the side of the old shuttle, her eyes glowing faintly again, but her body was weak. Her wound had darkened and sweat glistened on her brow. The fever was spreading faster now. Cale crouched beside her and checked the bandage. The infection was taking hold. Time was running out. They're coming, he said. She nodded slightly. I can't fight. You won't need to. A small transport vessel appeared over the ridge, silent and fast. It descended in a slow arc, its lights scanning the ground for movement. Kyle stepped out just enough to wave the old signal cloth, one he had kept hidden since his escape. The vessel hovered. Then a side hatch opened, and two figures jumped out, rifles raised. They moved with precision, scanning the area before lowering, their weapons at the sight of him. Identify, one of them called. Cale Bryn, he said. Former field medic, resistant cell Delta 3. The soldier stiffened. Recognition sparked in his eyes. You were marked dead. I escaped. I found someone. She needs help. Cale stepped aside. Their eyes landed on the Queen. The moment turned sharp. Both soldiers raised their rifles again. That's her, one of them whispered. Zilara, the butcher of Eridanus. She's wounded, Cale said quickly. She's not a threat. She killed thousands of our people. The other snapped. What kind of trap is this? Cale stepped between them and her, arms wide. I didn't call you here for war. I called you here to save a life. You expect us to help her? I'm not asking, I'm begging. Behind him, Zilara said nothing. Her pride screamed inside her, but her body betrayed her. She could, barely lift her head. The two soldiers exchanged glances. One of them spoke into a comm. "We have him, and we've got something else." "Yeah, that's something." A long pause followed. Then a voice crackled back. "Bring them both alive, but if she moves wrong, end her." The soldiers stepped forward. Kale turned to Solara. "They're taking us in." She looked at him. "You trust them?" "I trust the choice I made." They lifted her onto a stretcher and moved fast. Inside the ship, she was strapped down and given an IV of human antibiotics. Her face tensed at the touch of foreign medicine in her blood, but already the heat in her body began to ease. Kyle sat beside her, silent. Across from them, one of the soldiers stared at her with disgust. "You know what she did to our people?" he asked Kale. "Yes," Kale said. "And you still saved her?" Kale didn't blink. "Because something told me she didn't want to die like that." The soldier shook his head and turned away. As the ship rose into the clouds, Solara closed her eyes. The hum of the engines and the medicine in her veins pulled her into sleep. But before she drifted off, she whispered something only Kale heard. "You're a fool." Kale looked down at her. "But I think you may be the only real warrior I've ever met." He didn't know what to say, so he said nothing. The sky outside turned from red to gold as they left the dead zone behind. Below them, broken cities and shattered machines faded into mist. For the first time in her life, Queen Solara was in the hands of humans. And for the first time in his, Kale had protected someone who once ruled with iron claws. But neither of them knew what waited on the other side. Because sometimes the real battle begins after the war ends. The human outpost was buried deep beneath the hills, protected by layers of camouflage and old-world tech. It had once been a medical station during the early wars. Now it was one of the last safe zones left in this part of the galaxy. The transport ship landed in silence, its ramp hissing open into a dim underground hangar. Soldiers lined the walls, rifles ready. They weren't aiming at Kyle. All their eyes were on the stretcher holding the Queen. Solara remained still, her body weak but healing slowly from the antibiotics. Her skin still glowed faintly, but the fire in her eyes was dimmed. She didn't resist. She didn't speak. She only stared back at the soldiers like a lion behind a cracked cage. Kyle stepped off the ship with her, walking beside the stretcher. A man in a worn-out commander's coat stood at the front. His face was lined with years of battle and loss. He looked at Kyle first, then at the alien Queen with slow, burning anger. "Kale Bren," he said. "You were listed dead. Now you arrive carrying the Butcher of Eridanus?" Kale stood tall. "She's injured. She would have died if I left her behind." "That was the idea," the commander said coldly. "After what she did, that's what she deserved. She's not the same anymore." The commander's laugh was hollow. "They never are when they're on the ground bleeding." Kale didn't back down. "She's still a living being. She's not one of us. She is now, like it or not." There was a long silence. The soldiers tightened their grip on their weapons. The commander looked at the Queen. "If she moves, if she speaks out of turn, she's gone." Solara didn't blink. "Try me." The commander raised a brow. "Still got the venom, I see." They wheeled her into the infirmary, locking the door behind her. A full guard remained posted. Outside, Kale was pulled aside. The commander led him into a small office, shut the door, and stared him down. "You brought danger to this base." "I brought someone who needed help." "You brought a war criminal." "I brought someone who saved my life too," Kale said. The commander slammed his hand on the table. "She didn't save you. You saved her. And you'll be responsible for everything that happens from here." Kyle didn't argue. He only nodded. "Fine," the commander said. "She stays until she can walk. Then she leaves. You take her. You disappear. If she steps out of line before that, she dies. No debate." Kale left the room with tension in his chest. Inside the infirmary, Solara sat upright, her legs still strapped but healing. She looked up as he entered. "Well?" she asked. "You're not welcome here," Kale said. She gave a weak smile. "I never was." "You'll rest. Heal. Then we leave." together. Her eyes narrowed. You're choosing exile over safety. I'm choosing what's right over what's easy. She tilted her head. You really are strange, human. Maybe, Kale said. But you're alive. Outside, the soldiers still whispered. They didn't trust her. Some of them had lost family in her campaigns. Others had seen her on screens, always standing above corpses or commanding fleets. To them, she was death in armor. But now she was just a wounded woman behind glass walls, relying on a human's protection. That night, someone tried to enter her room. Kale heard the hiss of the door seal tampered with. He ran and caught the intruder, a young soldier with a knife shaking with rage. She killed my brother, the soldier cried. Kale stood between him and the queen. And killing her won't bring him back. She deserves it. She deserves a chance. The same way we all did once. The soldier lowered the blade, trembling. Then he left without a word. Solara had watched it all. When the door sealed again, she whispered something Kale never expected to hear. Thank you. This time it didn't sound like pride swallowing a word. It sounded real. The days passed in uneasy silence inside the hidden outpost. Queen Solara healed quickly. Her strength returned faster than expected. Her glowing markings brightened again. Her bones mended. The poison in her blood faded. But the scars inside her, those weren't so easy to erase. She barely spoke to the guards. Most of them kept their distance, whispering behind her back, watching her every movement. She didn't blame them. She would have done the same once, but Kale stayed close, always near, always calm. And slowly, the air between them changed. One morning, Solara stood on her own. No crutches, no pain in her eyes. She walked across the room with quiet grace. The humans outside watched her through the reinforced glass. Even without weapons, she looked like a storm waiting to break loose. Kale entered with a satchel. Inside were rations, a water canister, and a map. They want us gone today, he said. She nodded. I expected worse. They gave us 2 hours. She sat on the edge of the cot, her fingers tracing the stitches on her worn uniform. You're coming with me? If you'll have me. She looked at him carefully. Why? Because you're not who you were, and maybe neither am I. He offered his hand. She didn't take it, but she stood beside him. They left through the west gate, escorted by silent soldiers. No one spoke. The commander stood at the edge of the platform as the gate opened into the wild, broken land beyond. If she returns, the commander said, she dies. Kyle nodded once. She won't. They walked into the dawn together. The sky was pale and cold, and wind whipped through the broken stones like a warning. But they didn't look back. For hours, they walked in silence. Over hills, through crumbled forests, past skeletons of machines long destroyed by war. Solara said nothing, but Kale noticed her shoulders weren't as rigid anymore. Her steps had purpose. Her breath was steady. Finally, near the mouth of a dried riverbed, they stopped. Why did you really save me? She asked without turning. Kyle sat on a flat rock. Because I saw something in you. Not a queen, not a killer, just someone alone. You think loneliness makes me weak? I think it makes you human. She turned to him. I'm not. I know. She stepped closer. Her eyes glowed soft purple now. Not the harsh fire from before. You risked everything. Your people, your safety, for me. I didn't save a queen, Kyle said. I saved someone who could be more than what they were. She looked up at the sky. A soft wind brushed her face. For the first time, she didn't feel like the center of the galaxy. She felt small, alive, real. What now? She asked. Kale shrugged. We find a place that doesn't belong to empires. There are no such places. Then we make one. She walked to him and sat beside him on the rock. They stared out across the ruins together. I hated your kind. she said softly. I know. I don't anymore. I know that too. She didn't smile. Not fully. But something in her expression eased. The war hadn't ended in explosions or speeches. It had ended in silence, in two broken souls who chose mercy over revenge. As the sun rose higher, they stood again. Not as queen and slave, not as enemy and prisoner, but as something new, something the galaxy wasn't ready for, but maybe it needed.